Hello everyone, this is Module 3, Peer Training for Teachers and School Staff. We're going to talk about basic concepts of peer training and how you can create your own initiative in your organization. This is a module for Safe School Project. Thank you very much for watching. In this module, we talk about peer training. Peer training is a great way to promote learning. It facilitates the progress of colleagues in the same range and it potentiates the transmission of good practices. This module will make you understand what peer training is, how it works, and how you could create one for your organization. The module is composed by 3 learning units. Learning Unit A is about the first steps to understand peer training. It's divided by 4 subunits. The first one is what is peer training. We'll see a bit the basic concepts. Then in subunit 2, we'll see the introductory theories for peer training. In subunit 3, we will turn theory into practice, so we will explain you some practical ways to foment peer training. And in subunit 4, we will explain you a bit the role of a peer trainer. In Learning Unit B, we talk about the development of peer training. In subunit 1, we will talk about the advantages and importance of peer training. In subunit 2, we'll talk about the disadvantages and limitations of peer training. And in subunit 3, we'll talk about the strategies for peer training success. In the Learning Unit C, we'll talk about the roadmap of peer learning. In this learning unit, we explain you the different stages you have to cover to create your own peer training exercise. In subunit 1, we'll talk about the principles for potentiating learning on peer training. In subunit 2, we'll talk about the stages of peer training. In subunit 3, we'll talk about the first phase for creating a peer training exercise, which would be this establishing foundational engagement. In subunit 4, we'll talk about the second phase, which would be to achieve sustained engagement. In subunit 5, we'll talk about the third phase, which would be achieving training outcomes. And finally, in subunit 6, we'll talk about the phase 4, which would be to create change at scale. So here it is, we are starting the Learning Unit A, first steps to understand peer training. Thank you very much for being here. Learning Unit A, first steps to understand peer training. Objectives: to introduce peer training and some important theories. Knowledge: different theories where peer training bases part of the argument. Skills: theoretical knowledge, decision making, and teamwork. So, what is peer training? Peer training is the process whereby well-trained and motivated individuals undertake informal and organized educational activities with their peers, those similar to themselves in background or interests, over a period of time, aimed at developing their knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and skills. Peer-to-peer training is a great way for employees to learn information in a non-threatening way, and this form of training is the ideal way for employees to learn from one another. Some of the primary benefits of peer-to-peer training include team building. All peers are able to come together without the pressures of a daily routines. Development allows for both personal and professional development. It improves the expertise of all peers concerned. And quick and easy to organize. That is typical, no need to request additional funding because you are with your peers. In subunit A2, we are going to talk about the introductory theories for peer training. When undertaking a peer education program, the overall goal is to develop a recommended behavior. The following theories and models of behavior change are of particular relevance for peer education. We are talking about the theory of reasoned action, the social cognitive theory, diffusion of innovation theory, and the theory of participatory education. Now we are going to talk about the theory of reasoned action. This theory states that the intention of a person to adopt a recommended behavior is determined by the person's attitudes towards this behavior, his or her beliefs about the consequences of the behavior. For example, a young woman who thinks that using contraception will have a positive results for her will have a positive attitude towards contraceptive use. And the personal subjective, a person's personal viewpoint about an issue, and normative, that which is the norm or the standard in their society or group believes, based on what others think he or she should do and whether important individuals approve or disapprove the behavior. In the context of peer training, this is relevant because young people's attitudes are highly influenced by their perception of what their peers do and think, and young people may be highly motivated by the expectations of respected peer educators. It's important to take into account this theory because when we understand the influence we can have on other people, we understand the good we can make to other people as well. Now we're going to talk about the social learning, social cognitive theory. This theory is largely based upon the work of psychologist Albert Bandura. He states that people learn indirectly by observing and modeling on others with whom the person identifies, for example, how young people see their peers behaving, and through training in skills that lead to confidence in being able to carry out behavior. This specific condition is called self-efficacy, which includes the ability to overcome any barriers to performing the behavior. In the context of peer training, this is very important because it means that the inclusion of interactive experimental learning activities are extremely important because they actually have an effect on the person performing the training. And peer educators, in this sense, can be very important role models. Now we are talking about the diffusion of innovation theory. This theory argues that social influence plays an important role in behavior change. The role of opinion leaders in a community acting as agents for behavior change is a key element of this theory. Their influence on group norms or customs is predominantly seen as a result of person-to-person exchanges and discussions. In the context of peer training, this is important because it means that the selected peer educators should be trustworthy and credible opinion leaders within their target group. The opinion leader's role as educator is especially important in outreach work, where the target audience is not reached through formally planned activities, but through everyday social contacts. The theory of participatory education. This theory claims that empowerment and a full participation of the people affected by a given problem is a key to behavior change. In the context of peer training, this is important because many advocates of peer education claim that the horizontal process of peers talking among themselves are determining a course of action, and it's key to the success of a peer education project. I mean, most of your colleagues will feel in general more comfortable talking with a colleague of the same range instead of with a superior. So if you are able to learn and to work in an horizontal way, it will be probably much more engaging and probably much more defining to the result of the activity itself. We start subunit A3, turning theory into practice. Experiential learning. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. Confucius, a Chinese philosopher, was the one that applied this philosophy to his life and through part of the Chinese culture. Involving the participants in a training workshop in an active way that incorporates their own experience is absolutely essential. Such experiential learning gives the trainees an opportunity to begin developing their skills with immediate feedback. It also gives them the opportunity to participate in many of the training exercises techniques firsthand before they engage other peer educator trainees in such exercises. The module includes 4 elements: direct experience, an activity in which learners create an experience, reflection on the experience, conceptualization, learning the lessons, and then the application. In this experiential learning, you follow the cycle that we mentioned before. I'll start with direct experience. That could be activities such as brainstorming, role play and storytelling, small group discussions, case studies, games and drawing pictures, and of course the experience you have day to day, but that wouldn't apply to the training itself. Then you'd follow to the reflection on that experience. Question and answer discussion to understand what you lived, if what you lived corresponded to something, if it gave you something, if it didn't. Share reactions to the activity and identifying the key results of such activity. Then we would pass through conceptualization. That will be presenting the results and drawing general conclusions. This phase maybe is one of the most important because if you do things without understanding why you do them, without fully acknowledging what is the potential learning, in the end it's very hard that you will apply it. The final stage of the cycle that would be continuous, so it's not really a final stage, would be the application. How the skills or the knowledge can be useful in the lives of yourselves, of your peer trainers, and of the potential students you teach after. How to overcome difficulties in using knowledge and skills, and to create follow-ups on increasing these knowledge and skills. That's why it's important to apply what you learn and then brainstorm again, start again with the direct experience to progress in the activity and progress in your progression. Subunit A4. The role of a peer trainer. The main role of the peer trainer is to help the group members define their concerns and seek solutions through the mutual sharing of information and experience. He is the best person to disseminate new information and knowledge to the group members and can become a role model to others by practicing what he preaches. Since she and he is from the same group, there's empathy directly created and the understanding of emotions, thoughts, feelings, language of the participants, and therefore it creates a better direct relation between them. The basic requisite for becoming a peer educator is to be a peer. If you are a peer, you speak the same language and are familiar with the cultural norms and values of the group community. It is important for them to have some training in group facilitation or peer education. In order to answer questions clearly and correctly, the peer educator also needs to have an overall knowledge of the subject, although it is not necessary to be a complete expert. It is generally better to refer people to organizations or leaflets where more information can be found. A peer educator should be aware of where more information and support can be accessed. As a pupil grows into the role of a peer educator, one should increase one's knowledge of the subject and include related subjects. A peer educator should be sensitive, open-minded, a good listener, and a good communicator. She or he should be acceptable to the community and be trustworthy. In brief, she or he should possess good interpersonal skills. A peer educator should also develop leadership and motivation skills. People often tend to judge others. Peer educators need to be non-judgmental and open-minded. Being non-judgmental means not making judgment statements out loud or in one's mind. Here are some tips for peer educators. Peer educators need the skills to bring out the views and concerns of the participants. It is important to realize that the peer educator role is to give information and let people make their own decisions based on facts. A peer educator should always avoid being directive and authoritarian. She or he is a peer and not a parent. Make sure participants know that there will be no report of the session made. Ask them to try not to discuss the opinions of particular individuals outside of the group, but warn them that confidentiality cannot be guaranteed. The discussion should be conducted in a manner that is not personalized and specific. If possible, give out information about where individuals who want to discuss a personal situation can get confidential advice. At the end of the training, do not forget to ask them to fill out evaluation forms you have prepared. It makes the work much easier the next time around. Practical activity number 1. The duration of this activity will be between 80 to 110 minutes. The type of the activity is a video and then a debate. The objective of the activity is to initiate a debate together with your peers about the importance of feedbacks and ways to receive it more. Skills and abilities developed by peers. Stimulate communication, improve capacity for empathy, work in a team, decision making, and feedback giving.
Everyone needs a coach. It doesn't matter whether you're a basketball player, a tennis player, a gymnast, or a bridge player. My bridge coach, Sharon Osberg, says there are more pictures of the back of her head than anyone else's in the world. Sorry, Sharon. Here you go. We all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. Unfortunately, there's one group of people who get almost no systematic feedback to help them do their jobs better. And these people have one of the most important jobs in the world. I'm talking about teachers. When Melinda and I learned how little useful feedback most teachers get, we were blown away. Until recently, over 98% of teachers just got one word of feedback: satisfactory. If all my bridge coach ever told me was that I was satisfactory, I would have no hope of ever getting better. How would I know who is the best? How would I know what I was doing differently? Today, districts are revamping the way they evaluate teachers, but we still give them almost no feedback that actually helps them improve their practice. Our teachers deserve better. The system we have today isn't fair to them. It's not fair to students, and it's putting America's global leadership at risk. So today I want to talk about how we can help all teachers get the tools for improvement they want and deserve. Let's start by asking, who's doing well? Well, unfortunately, there's no international ranking tables for teacher feedback systems. So I looked at the countries whose students perform well academically and looked at what they're doing to help their teachers improve. Consider the rankings for reading proficiency. The US isn't number 1. We're not even in the top 10. We're tied for 15th with Iceland and Poland. Now, out of all the places that do better than the US in reading, how many of them have a formal system for helping teachers improve? 11 out of 14. The US is tied for 15th in reading, but we're 23rd in science and 31st in math. So there's really only one area where we're near the top, and that's in failing to give our teachers the help they need to develop their skills. Let's look at the best academic performer, the province of Shanghai, China. Now, they rank number 1 across the board in reading, math, and science. And one of the keys to Shanghai's incredible success is the way they help teachers keep improving. They make sure that younger teachers get a chance to watch master teachers at work. They have weekly study groups where teachers get together and talk about what's working. They even require each teacher to observe and give feedback to their colleagues. You might ask, why is a system like this so important? It's because there's so much variation in the teaching profession. Some teachers are far more effective than others. In fact, there are teachers throughout the country who are helping their students make extraordinary gains. If today's average teacher could become as good as those teachers, our students would be blowing away the rest of the world. So we need a system that helps all our teachers be as good as the best. What would that system look like? Well, to find out, our foundation has been working with 3,000 teachers in districts across the country on a project called Measures of Effective Teaching. We had observers watch videos of teachers in the classroom and rate how they did on a range of practices. For example, did they ask their students challenging questions? Did they find multiple ways to explain an idea? We also had students fill out surveys with questions like, does your teacher know when the class understands a lesson? Do you learn to correct your mistakes? And what we found is very exciting. First, the teachers who did well on these observations had far better student outcomes. So it tells us we're asking the right questions. And second, teachers in the program told us that these videos and these surveys from the students were very helpful diagnostic tools because they pointed to specific places where they can improve. I'm going to show you what this video component of MET looks like in action.
Good morning, everybody. Let's talk about what's going on today. To get started, we're doing a peer review day, okay, a peer review day. And our goal by the end of class is for you to be able to determine whether or not you have moves to prove in your essays.
My name is Sarah Brown-Westling. I am a high school English teacher at Johnston High School in Johnston, Iowa.
Turn to somebody next to you. Tell them what you think I mean when I talk about moves to prove.
I think that there is a difference for teachers between the abstract of how we see our practice and then the concrete reality of it.
Okay, so I would like you to please bring up your papers.
I think what video offers for us is a certain degree of reality. You can't really dispute what you see on the video. And there is a lot to be learned from that. And there's a lot of ways that we can grow as a profession when we actually get to see this. I just have a flip camera and a little tripod and invested in a tiny little wide angle lens. At the beginning of class, I just perch it in the back of the classroom. It's not a perfect shot. It doesn't catch every little thing that's going on, but I can hear the sound, I can see a lot, and I'm able to learn a lot from it. So it really has been a simple but powerful tool in my own reflection.
All right, let's take a look at the long one first, okay?
Once I'm finished taping, then I put it in my computer and then I'll scan it and, take a peek at it. If I don't write things down, I don't remember them. So having the notes is part of my thinking process, and I discover what I'm seeing as I'm writing. I really have used it for my own personal growth and my own personal reflection on teaching strategy and methodology and classroom management and just all of those different facets of the classroom.
I'm glad that we've actually done the process before so we can kind of compare what works, what doesn't. So
I think that video exposes so much of what's intrinsic to us as teachers in ways that help us learn and help us understand, and then help our broader communities understand what this complex work is really all about. I think it is a way to exemplify and illustrate things that we cannot convey in a lesson plan, things you cannot convey in a standard, things that you cannot even sometimes convey in a book of pedagogy.
All righty, everybody, have a great weekend. I'll see you later.
One day, we'd like every classroom in America to look something like that. But we still have more work to do. Diagnosing areas where a teacher needs to improve is only half the battle. We also have to give them the tools they need to act on the diagnosis. If you learn that you need to improve the way you teach fractions, you should be able to watch a video of the best person in the world teaching fractions. So building this complete teacher feedback and improvement system won't be easy. For example, I know some teachers aren't immediately comfortable with the idea of a camera in the classroom. That's understandable. But our experience with MET suggests that if teachers manage the process, if they collect video in their own classrooms and they pick the lessons they want to submit, a lot of them will be eager to participate. Building the system will also require a considerable investment. Our foundation estimates that it could cost up to $5 billion. Now that's a big number, but to put it in perspective, it's less than 2% of what we spend every year on teachers' salaries. The impact for teachers would be phenomenal. We would finally have a way to give them feedback, as well as the means to act on it. But this system would have an even more important benefit for our country. It would put us on a path to making sure all our students get a great education, find a career that's fulfilling and rewarding, and have a chance to live out their dreams. This wouldn't just make us a more successful country. It would also make us a more fair and just one, too. I'm excited about the opportunity to give all our teachers the support they want and deserve. I hope you are too. Thank you.
Feedback maybe is the biggest keyword in this video. You should discuss while the debate starts. You should guide your peers with questions like, what real feedback means to you? Do you ask for it? Do you foment it in your organization? These are some questions that might be interested. Of course, the conversation will most definitely evolve through some of them, and you should share ideas between each other. These ideas should be written down by one peer, so it remains and it maybe creates a potential draft for an action plan. What can we do to improve the feedback system? On our organizations, of course. This part, you can guide them with questions like, can we help ourselves improve even without the ideal organizational structure? What type of feedback would you like to receive? And do you give feedback to your peers? It's important to emphasize here as well the leading by example. Even if you are not at the peak of your organization hierarchy, it's important that for the organization direction to understand that with more feedbacks, things work better. How can we improve the feedback system? What type of feedback do you receive in your organization right now? What would be the ideal system for receiving feedback? And are you willing to try to propose a plan for the development of a feedback system in your organization? These are several questions that you and your peers should answer to try to create a consistent system for your organization, a system where feedback is of great importance for the continuous development and progress of the teachers. Learning Unit B, the development of peer training. Learning Unit B, development of peer training. Objectives: to understand the different viewpoints of a peer training initiative and gain new strategies. Knowledge: increase the level of understanding on peer training and different strategies on how to apply them. Skills: activity planning and delivering, decision making, argumentation. Subunit B1, advantages and importance of peer training. Peer tutoring activities, whether occasional or frequent, can deliver research-backed benefits to both the peers. Here are 5 benefits that exemplify the importance of peer training. The first benefit we are going to talk about is the increased literacy scores. Peers who read and discuss story passages with their peers recall more content and score higher on assessments, according to a Ohio University pilot study. The researcher divided 4 average reading 6th grade students into pairs. The first pair participated in peer reading activities twice a week, whereas students in the second pair read the same passages individually at the same frequency. The first pair scored higher on each reading assessment. The second benefit be develop reasoning and critical thinking skills. Students who work in pairs and groups typically perform better on tests that involve reasoning and critical thinking, according to an oft-cited study about science education. This is largely because students must become active learners, discussing and rationalizing lesson concepts in their own words. These studies, you'll be able to find a link to them downloading the PDF file of this module in the Safe School site. Another benefit is improved confidence and interpersonal skills. Many studies about peer training point to peers building confidence and communication abilities. Pioneering research from 1988 states that tutors improve the self-esteem of and interpersonal skills by giving feedback. This is another great benefit of giving feedback to your peers, to your students, to anyone. Tutees realize these benefits by asking questions and receiving immediate clarification. A later study of at-risk students echoed these advantages as well. Increased comfort and openness. The same 1988 study indicates that peers generally identify more easily with people of the same range, other peers. Teachers identify with teachers, students identify with students, and more than with the authority figure. An adult in the case of studies may be a superior in the case of teachers. This helps to create an environment in which peers are more comfortable to ask questions and work through challenging problems in an environment free from the potential ridicule. The last benefit and advantage we are going to talk about in this subunit is versatility. There is a big range of peer training exercises based on different subjects and objectives defined There are a lot of ideas and possibilities to make peer learning a fun, easygoing experience. When creating this module, we wanted to give the users of the module, the people that want to learn more about peer training and try to create a peer training exercise for their organizational center or educational center, wanted to give a consistent overview of what exists, and that implies not only talking about the advantages and the importance of peer training, but also warn about the potential disadvantages or limitations of peer training. There are reasons why other teachers hesitate to run peer tutoring activities, many of which concern how peers interact with each other. Here are disadvantages to weigh against the aforementioned advantages. Although you can share teaching tips and guidelines with other peers, they won't necessarily become expert educators, and you or the person, the peer educator that is talking to you, is not necessarily an expert educator. There is always the chance that the peer educator won't properly support the other peers, giving ineffective feedback or unneeded criticism. Many peer teaching activities fail due to this, according to a book compiled research. This source you can find in the PDF. Download it from Safe School project website. Another disadvantage and limitation could be the peer hesitancy. Pairing peers together can backfire, as some may feel inferior being taught by certain peers. On the other hand, some peers won't put effort into the exercise, as they won't be keen on it from the get-go. This can lead to tense relationships and, according to the same book, scarce content coverage. We are going to mention two more disadvantages and limitations. One of them is the lack of confidentiality. In many types of peer training scenarios, other peers can clearly see who's the one less prepared. This means there's a way that there might be too much transparency with regards to who's excelling and who's struggling. For example, activities in which peers do role-playing and take turns teaching. This can be uncomfortable for other teachers. Another disadvantage and limitation is that it perpetuates errors if the errors exist. I mean, if a peer training has bad habits, this will only perpetuate them. If they are within the peers, peer-to-peer training is a good way to multiply them. As it is a good way to multiply good habits as well. We cannot forget this. To conclude this subunit and the one of advantages, I wanted to mention that nothing is perfect. It's that I think is clear to everyone, and everything has its limitations. However, peer training can offer a lot, if done well, and can educate and expand good practice among peers. If you have a good peer educator that can lead a peer group, you can improve widely, and you can become a better teacher, a better educator, or a better employee, because peer training can apply to many fields. It can change the way peers approach their duties and make the community better, make them feel more included in the community of their peers, and can create change at scale, really. In subunit B3, we are going to talk about strategies for peer training success. We are going to mention a variety of practical activities that you can use to improve in different fields and to tackle different problems within a peer training exercise. Role play is one of the main ways of experimenting with peers. is a way of working through a situation, a scenario, or a problem by assuming roles and practicing what to say and do in a safe setting. This kind of learning experience has several benefits and advantages when it's implemented skillfully by a good trainer or teacher. Instructors can supplement their teaching methods with role-playing in any context where it seems relevant. Now we will present a series of role-playing activities that can be practiced by you. In the first sector of role-playing activities that we are going to show you some focused on collaboration. The first one would be making connection with a quiet child. So you would practice making a connection with a child who is quiet, shy or sad. Think about how to be close to the child without overwhelming him or her. This activity, train it with a peer. One peer being the child and another being the educator. Another activity that you could do is a daily greeting students individually. Set up practice where teacher greets students individually in the morning and instructs students to represent different personalities. So, some peers would be happy, some peers would be exuberant, shy, angry, difficult, and you would have to adapt to each situation individually. Another good activity would be a daily goodbye ritual. Ask teacher to demonstrate his or her regular daily goodbye ritual. May change with developmental level, songs for younger students, verbal or signals, such as thumbs up for older students. This is really wide, but it could be a very good exercise to do with peers, because then you can see what other teachers use and maybe you can teach them something and get something for them. Even only for experimental reasons, it could be a quite interesting exercise. Still on collaboration role-playing, we have also activities such as helping a discouraged child. So practice how to respond to a child who is discouraged and frustrated about any given assignment. Maybe you can turn from the position of the child and from the position of the educator with your colleague. Another good practice would be a phone call to parents. Practice a phone call to parents to establish a positive relationship. Focus of the call should be to get to know the parent, open lines of communication, and convey enthusiasm about the child. Nothing negative. After doing one practice in large group, having teachers practice in pairs. Encouraging peer relationships could be also a great practice to do between peer educators. Maybe you can practice setting up a situation where more competent students help a peer who is struggling, or a more shy student with a student that maybe it's more popular. Try to get them together, try to find possible and potential connections to integrate. Now, from the role-playing activities, we are going to talk about activities concerning preventing behavior problems. One of them would be the teaching children rules. Break teachers into groups of 4-5 people. Assign each group one rule and ask the group to brainstorm developmentally appropriate ways of helping students understand the rule. For example, role plays or games students might do, visual cues. Then have a group pick a teacher to demonstrate how to teach to his/her students using their brainstorm ideas. Other potential activity would be sharing stretch games. Ask teachers to share stretch break games or songs they use in their classes. Have at least one teacher teach his/her song game to the whole group. Still in preventing behavior problems, another activity could be the transitions. Have a teacher practice leading a transition, including a warning and then directions for the actual transition. Coach him/her to praise students who are ready. Use developmental principles to suit age group of students. Opening circle time, it's another potential good activity. Practice a transition to circle time. Emphasize beginning a song or other interesting activity that will capture student attention and minimize waiting. Have students join circle at various points. Have a teacher focus on students who are engaged, ignore those who are not. Still in preventing behavior problems, we can have a practice of commands. Have teacher give clear positive commands for a transition. Make situation developmentally appropriate to age group. Or nonverbal signs, for example. Have a teacher practice using a nonverbal signal while conducting circle time. Finger to mouth, quiet hand up. Signs that give a clear message on what you want without any sound. In these different role-playing activities, now we are going to focus on the importance of teacher attention, coaching, and praise. One potential activity would be giving descriptive praise. Ask a teacher to circulate among several students who are working on academic tasks. Challenge him/her to give each student a descriptive praise, using the list of academic persistent coaching statements. Praising positive social behaviors could be a very interesting practice as well. Set up a situation where children are following directions, listening or attending. For example, lining up, circle time, transitioning. Have teacher focus on praising positive behaviors, listening, hands to self, calm bodies. Ignore minor off-task behavior. Also, in the importance of teacher attention, coaching, and praise, we have exercises such as social coaching in a large group. Choose two teachers to be students and have them play cooperatively with toys. Have a teacher use social coaching to reinforce helping, sharing, waiting, taking turns, between many other things you know the students can do. You can also do this in a smaller group. Break up into small groups and ask several teachers to role play being children while one teacher practices social coaching and one is an observer. After the practice, the observer gives feedback on the types of social behaviors coached. The children give feedback about their feelings, reiterate instructions for children to be cooperative. Other activities inside the importance of teacher attention, coaching, and praise could be proximal praise. Pick several participants to be students and ask a teacher to demonstrate proximity praise. Ignoring. Set up a practice with a student calling out answers. Coach a teacher to ignore calling out and praise prompt and quiet hands. Persistent coaching. Practice persistent coaching. Have teachers praise persistence, trying hard, keeping at it, trying again, sticking with it. It's very important for students' development that we praise good soft skills. Now, from the different strategies for peer training success related with role-playing, we are talking about motivating children through incentives. The first practice I'm going to mention is transition incentive. Set up a role-play using incentives for a transition time. Have the teacher use a transition warning, clearly give instructions for the transition, and then use a developmentally appropriate system to reward child who follows directions. Hand stamp, getting to line up first, ticket, or points. Make sure to combine incentive with coaching and descriptive praise. Instruct a group of children to get ready at different rates, so teacher can practice giving incentives as children are ready, but make sure all children do comply with directions. Inside the role-playing activities to motivate children through incentives, we can also practice not earning a reward. Set up a scenario where a child does not earn a specified reward. Have a teacher give this information to the student in a way that focuses on the future chances for success, and talk about how failure is an opportunity to grow and failure is not failure by itself. It's a step towards success in many ways. Another practice would be spontaneous rewards. Set up a circle time and have teacher use spontaneous reward to highlight children who are paying attention or did some job well. Another practice could be first/then. Set up a practice using first then rule. First you finish cleaning up, then you can have a snack. This can be very useful and is a potential good incentivizer, although if you abuse it, maybe there's not a clear potential progress made by the student, and itself is just doing because of the reward and not because he understands why is he doing it. Inside these strategies, now we're going to talk about role-playing activities to decrease inappropriate behavior. One of the role plays could be a teacher working with two students at a table. One student is off task with minor disruptive behavior and the other student is mildly distracted but is working. Teacher ignores disruptive behavior and focuses on positive, looks for chance to engage disruptive student. Another potential role play could be practice ignoring a tantrum during circle time. Instruct a child to be loud but not destructive. Brainstorm with teachers ideas for keeping the class engaged while ignoring. Also, in decreasing inappropriate behavior, we can have the exercise of contrasting styles. Set up a role play where child engages in disruptive and disrespectful behavior. Name calling, back talk, during circle time. First, have teacher try to stop student with commands, threats, warnings. In other words, do not ignore, but try to make child stop. Freeze role play and redo. While first brainstorming with the group about how to ignore this kind of extremely disruptive behavior, praising others for ignoring, make activity more fun, pull other children closely, instruct teacher to look for a chance to praise or draw in disruptive child. Now this set of exercises of role play, it's towards emotional regulation, social skills and problem solving. One example of a role play practice could be put teachers in small groups and give each a children's book containing a social problem. Have one teacher read a book and discuss with students. Another activity possibility could be have a teacher coach two students who want to play with the same toys. Focus on waiting, patience, sharing, trading, and taking turns. With this, we end this set of activities that we showed you. Really, it's kind of endless the quantity of type of role-playing activities you can do with your peers. It's just you have to pick a situation, a problem that you have, and you have to try to set it up and brainstorm on how can you solve the problem, how could you solve the situation, how can you improve the class. The information your peers will give you, it's not that it's better than yours. It shouldn't be, but it's different. Different experiences convey in different approaches, and learning these approaches, it's very fruitful for any educator and any peer. Now we are going to talk as well about a practical activity. An activity a bit more dense than the ones mentioned before. Peer coaching. Peer coaching is an interactive process between two or more teaching professionals that is used to share successful practices through collaboration and reflective practice, act as a problem-solving vehicle, reduce isolation among teachers, create a forum for addressing instructional problems, support and assisting new teachers in their practice, build collaborative norms to enable teachers to give and receive ideas and assistance. Peer coaching also provides a mechanism through which teachers can gain deeper insight from workshops. Having a peer coach allows a teacher to try out new strategies learned in a workshop and get feedback on how these strategies worked in the classroom. Peer coaching also helps teachers to internalize what they've learned and to apply it in their own classroom, and then take part in professional discussion about it. This activity is divided in 3 phases: a pre-conference part, a phase of observation, and a phase of post-conference. Right now we are going to define them so you understand better what we are talking about. The pre-conference phase. During the pre-conference phase, teachers meet and discuss the elements that the teacher being observed wants to focus on. They discuss the specific lessons planned, its context, and other relevant factors that influence student outcomes. The peer coach is responsible only for providing that teacher with another perspective of the learning environment, so they can mutually improve teaching and learning. Following up, it's the observation phase, where the peer coach observes in the teacher's classroom as an observer. He will not act, he will simply be there looking for how the teacher handles the situation. In the post-conference phase, the peer coach schedules a post-conference to discuss the outcome of the lesson. The observed teacher should take the lead in this conversation, with the observer adding factual information about what happened during the lesson. They may discuss what worked well, what didn't work at all, and what could be changed or improved to have a positive impact on the teaching and learning in the classroom. Important aspects of this stage are: the observed teacher is in control of the lesson. The emphasis is on reflection on what has happened during the lesson and analysis of its impact on the student learning. Peer coaching is not one teacher acting as an expert and the other a novice or apprentice. If it is done like that, it will not work, and it stops making sense, the peer. Because if one acts as an authoritarian figure, then the sense of the exercise is a bit lost. It is not based on evaluating and judging performance. This is a system for continual improvement and growth for both educators. The educator that is observing is not observing to criticize the teacher that is acting. It's observing to learn as well, to learn and to give feedback. It is not just a process for initiating new teachers into the profession. Any teacher could do it, because education grows and improves continuously, So a teacher with 20 years of career might learn something for a new graduate, and this helps potentiate the improvement by direct experience. It is not intended to be a part of an evaluation process. If this is done as an evaluation process, it stops being a peer coaching activity, and the observed teacher might be a bit overwhelmed to try to experiment new things while being analyzed by another teacher that is evaluating him. Peer coaching is built on a trusting relationship between a pair of teachers that is designed to be non-competitive and mutually respectful, focused on the continual improvement of their teaching methods. Practical activity number 2. The duration of the activity will be of around 60 to 80 minutes. The type of the activity is a video and a continuous debate. The objective is to initiate a debate together with your peers about the importance of leading and being important to the people we are with. Skills and abilities developed by peers. To stimulate communication, to improve capacity for empathy, work in a team, decision making, self-confidence and feedback giving.
I want to start by asking everyone in the audience here a question. How many of you are completely comfortable with calling yourselves a leader? See, I've asked that question all the way across the country, and everywhere I ask it, no matter where, there's always a huge portion of the audience that won't put up their hand. And I've come to realize that we have made leadership into something bigger than us. We made it into something beyond us. We made it about changing the world. And we've taken this title of leader and we treat it as if it's something that one day we're going to deserve. But to give it to ourselves right now means a level of arrogance or cockiness that we're not comfortable with. And I worry sometimes that we spend so much time celebrating amazing things that hardly anybody can do that we've convinced ourselves that those are the only things we're celebrating. And we start to devalue the things that we can do every day. And we start to take moments where we truly are a leader and we don't let ourselves take credit for it and we don't let ourselves feel good about it. And I've been lucky enough over the last 10 years to work with some amazing people who have helped me redefine leadership in a way that I think has made me happier. And with my short time today, I just want to share with you the one story that is probably most responsible for that redefinition. I went to a school on a little school called Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick. And on my last day there, a girl came up to me and she said, "I remember the first time that I met you." And then she told me a story that happened 4 years earlier. She said, "On my day before I started university, I was in a hotel room with my mom and my dad, and I was so scared and so convinced that I couldn't do this, that I wasn't ready for university, that I just burst into tears. And my mom and my dad were amazing. They were like, 'Look, we know you're scared, but let's just go tomorrow. Let's go to the first day, and if at any point you feel as if you can't do this, that's fine. Just tell us, we will take you home. We love you no matter what.'" And she said, so I went the next day and I was standing in line getting ready for registration and I looked around and I just knew I couldn't do it. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I had to quit. And she says, I made that decision and as soon as I made it, there was this incredible feeling of peace that came over me. And I turned to my mom and my dad to tell them that we needed to go home. And just at that moment, you came out of the Student Union building wearing the stupidest hat I have ever seen in my life. It was awesome. And you had a big sign promoting Shinorama, which is Students Fighting Cystic Fibrosis, a charity I've worked with for years. And you had a bucket full of lollipops. And you were walking along and you were handing the lollipops out to people in line and talking about Shinorama. And all of a sudden, you got to me and you just stopped and you stared. It was creepy. This girl right here knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then you looked at the guy next to me and you smiled and you reached in your bucket, you pulled out a lollipop and you held it out to him. And you said, you need to give a lollipop to the beautiful woman standing next to you. And she said, I have never seen anyone get more embarrassed faster in my life. He turned beet red, and he wouldn't even look at me. He just kind of held the lollipop out like this. And I felt so bad for this dude that I took the lollipop. And as soon as I did, you got this incredibly severe look on your face, and you looked at my mom and my dad, and you said, look at that, look at that. First day away from home, and already she's taking candy from a stranger. And she said, everybody lost it. 20 feet in every direction, everyone started to howl. And I know this is cheesy, and I don't know why I'm telling you this. But in that moment when everyone was laughing, I knew that I shouldn't quit. I knew that I was where I was supposed to be, and I knew that I was home. And I haven't spoken to you once in the 4 years since that day, but I heard that you were leaving. And I had to come up and tell you that you've been an incredibly important person in my life, and I'm gonna miss you. Good luck. And she walks away, and I'm flattened. And she gets about 6 feet away, she turns around and smiles and goes, you should probably know this too. I'm still dating that guy 4 years later. A year and a half after I moved to Toronto, I got an invitation to their wedding. Here's the kicker, I don't remember that. I have no recollection of that moment, and I've searched my memory banks because that is funny, and I should remember doing it, and I don't remember it. And that was such an eye-opening, transformative moment for me to think that maybe the biggest impact I'd ever had on anyone's life, a moment that had a woman walk up to a stranger 4 years later and say, you've been an incredibly important person in my life, was a moment that I didn't even remember. How many of you guys have a lollipop moment, a moment where someone said something or did something that you feel fundamentally made your life better? All right. How many of you have told that person they did it? See, why not? We celebrate birthdays where all you have to do is not die for 365 days. And yet we let people who have made our lives better walk around without knowing it. And every single one of you has been the catalyst for a lollipop moment. You have made someone's life better by something that you said or that you did. And if you think you haven't, think about all the hands that didn't go back up when I asked that question. You're just one of the people who hasn't been told. But it is so scary to think of ourselves as that powerful. It can be frightening to think that we can matter that much to other people. Because as long as we make leadership something bigger than us, as long as we keep leadership something beyond us, as long as we make it about changing the world, we give ourselves an excuse not to expect it every day from ourselves and from each other. Marianne Williamson said, "Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light and not our darkness that frightens us." And my call to action today is that we need to get over that. We need to get over our fear of how extraordinarily powerful we can be in each other's lives. We need to get over it so we can move beyond it. And our little brothers and our little sisters, and one day our kids, or our kids right now, can watch us start to value the impact we can have on each other's lives more than money and power and titles and influence. We need to redefine leadership as being about lollipop moments. How many of them we create, how many of them we acknowledge, how many of them we pay forward, and how many of them we say thank you for. Because we've made leadership about changing the world, and there is no world. There's only 6 billion understandings of it. And if you change one person's understanding of it, one person's understanding of what they're capable of, one person's understanding of how much people care about them, one person's understanding of how powerful an agent for change they can be in this world, you've changed the whole thing. And if we can understand leadership like that, I think if we can redefine leadership like that, I think we can change everything. And it's a simple idea, but I don't think it's a small one. And I want to thank you all so much for letting me share it with you today.
The discussions and the debate start. You should guide them with questions like, what is leadership for you? What it is to be important, and do you feel important in your organization? One peer should write down the shared ideas in order to create a clear view of all the ideas shared between all of you. How to be more important? Do you feel you have the power to be important in your organization? In what way? How can we be important to each other and to our students? Shared ideas would be written down by one peer who offers to volunteer. These questions are to develop during the conversation. You should develop them in a free way, and depending on the engagement, it can take more or less time. Learn Unit C. In this learning unit, we are going to talk about the roadmap of peer training. So we are going to cover the different phases of that peer training has and that you have to follow to achieve a successful peer training exercise and establish one that can create change at scale. Objectives of the Learn Unit C. To understand the needs and steps necessary to develop a peer training initiative. Knowledge that you will get in this learning unit to increase the level of understanding on how a successful peer training initiative is developed. Skills. Gain know-how, argumentation and decision-making skills in the moment of develop a peer training initiative. Subunit C1. The principles for potentiating learning on peer training. Peer training is most effective when learning objectives are clear and peer engagements are structured to maximize these objectives. When individual peers are matched appropriately and authorized to and empowered to engage effectively, peer learning is optimized. Learning is best facilitated when peers do things together and reflect regularly on what they are learning. Other driving factors for successful peer training are that peers engage with each other in an honest and committed manner. They engage with each other over a medium to long period, and they engage in multiple ways, including through shared work and site visits. It is important that the learning gains of individual peers are communicated back to those authorizing the engagement of these peers to ensure continued support for the learning process. This is enabled when the home organizations of each peer commit to allow peers to communicate their learning back into the organizations, and structure a strategy to ensure this is done regularly. Peers should be encouraged and empowered to share their learning back into their organizations. This process is facilitated if the organizations authorizing peers to engage give formal authorization to these peers. It is important for facilitators to simplify the process of peer engagement to ensure peers find this process as easy as possible, with limited administrative demands and costs. The many facets of peer learning gains are evaluated, from initial engagement through individual learning to organizational learning from the peers and a final reform impact. Subunit C2. The stages of peer training. Research suggests common stages involved in the peer learning process. These stages combine into a peer training process map and involves a pre-foundational engagement where consideration is given to basic questions about peer engagement, followed by a foundational event, a period whereby peer engagement is sustained over time to build trust and sharing, structure engagements to actually foster relevant learning outcomes in individuals, and finally, a period whereby learning is diffused from individuals to organizations to foster the impact at scale. So, let's start with the pre-foundational engagement stage. Achieving deep individual peer training that also diffuses and leads to impact requires addressing challenges in all four stages. Initiatives that do not pass through these stages can still add value, facilitating peer engagement, for instance, or adding to the learning of individuals. But the real potential of peer learning involves covering the full territory shown in this process map. In the pre-foundational stage, it is important to remember that peer training is a specific tool and needs to be adopted when appropriate and possible. Clarity about the goals of peer training is vital. Peer learning can be a valuable approach to generate and disseminate knowledge and even a motivational tool in many sectors. It tends to work best when targeted at a specific sector or area, when a community of practice already exists to mobilize peers to participate in the learning process. Peer training is valuable in fostering learning about many dimensions of reform, but the most valuable dimension is in facilitating the sharing of tacit knowledge among peers. One can also note that peer engagement is valuable to foster modern learning, like professional networking or support. The more effective peer learning involves initiatives that are clear about what the peers are expected to learn from each other. This does not mean they are prescriptive, but they can describe whether the initiative is about disseminating technical, process, or other knowledge. This clarity helps in attracting peers and in designing the peer training process. Peer training initiatives should target peers carefully. Peers are individuals, not organizations, so there is a need to target real people and ensure that the type of peer can be described before the initiative is launched. Subunit C3, Phase 1, Establishing Foundational Engagement. Peer learning processes usually begin by assembling potential peers together. There are many ways to do this, and it matters how is it done. Effective foundational engagements can build commitment and trust and interest in future engagement and sharing. Less effective engagement can undermine future learning potential. If one wants to foster learning among peers, it is vital to bring the right group together and facilitate an effective communication and sharing environment. Peers who learn from each other are individuals, not organizations. This means that you cannot match an organization with another organization. You must match people in the organization who have ideas to share and brains to receive. It is often effective to involve peers in the matching process, asking them to complete surveys before the peers are assembled, where they note the challenges they are facing, for instance. This pre-foundational engagement often helps build motivation and interest in peers. This exercise, you should do it with empathy. When engaging in a peer training process, what would you prefer? Maybe you'd prefer to get to know a bit the potential peers you will be working with, see if you feel comfortable with them or not. So I think it's very important that you take into account that the peers should have a certain involvement in deciding which people they are going to work with, because that will be vital for the progress they reach with this peer training process. One can match peers based on a variety of factors, but some stand out as more effective than others. Evidence shows that one of the most effective when matching is doing it according to shared challenges and problems. Learning also happens when matched according to the position and task or policy initiative. Peers find each other in foundational engagements when those attending engage fully, which is encouraged by ensuring that peers are motivated to attend. It is important to make communication easy between peers. Ensuring the engagement space and agenda allow easy interaction, making peers confident to engage and fostering commitment among peers. Trust is the cornerstone of all peer learning. Trust building exercise must be incorporated in the foundational phase in order to enable later stages. In this phase, you have to ask yourself who the peers are. Identify the peers to engage with, involve in the process, ensure peers are effectively matched through initial events, initial exercises, and managing differences among peers, personalities, cultures, between many more factors that you have to face while creating this foundational engagement. Then you have to get the peers to engage fully. How? Well, building trust among peers, ensuring all peers have the same willingness to learn, the same motivation, ensuring peers are fully engaged from the start. For this, it's important to make exercises to promote engagement and to make you understand who is not engaged, and ensuring peers have authority to engage fully in the peer learning process. Then you have to take into account the logistics of peer interaction, and by that I mean ensuring peers have the time to engage with peers. Face-to-face events, it's usually the most effective. Ensuring peers have the means and the time to engage with peers after face-to-face events, because that's when they are able to talk of what they experience, what they not, what they learned, and it promotes engagement. Finding the appropriate venues for face-to-face peer engagement, finding the appropriate media for non-face-to-face peer engagement, because communication is key. Communication is key in almost everything, but in peer learning is absolutely vital. If the peers don't have the possibility to communicate easily telematically, it will be very hard that the engagement keeps up on the long term. And of course, ensuring logistics are effective and continuously addressed. The objective, of course, is to take out any potential obstacle the peer might have to learn with other peers. Now we begin subunit C4, which we talk about the phase 2, with the objective of achieve sustained engagement. This is the stage in the peer training process map after the foundational engagement, where peers keep connected and engaged. It is the stage where they build trust and learn from each other in a potentially deep and experiential way. Few facilitators of peer training activities have explicit strategy in place to foster sustained peer engagement. However, peers learn from each other most effectively when they engage over long periods of time. In order to foster deep and experiential learning between peers, ensuring this sustained engagement is absolutely key. Now we'll talk about some different tools to promote different parts of the peer learning process. We are talking about creating the foundational engagement. This foundational engagement, you have to understand that we want it to be in the first phase, but as it is a continuous process, well, you have to promote the foundational engagement continuously, because maybe new educators come, new peers arrive, and maybe in the first phase you are not able to engage between themselves as you would like to. So you have to facilitate a set of exercises during that correlate between phases to increase the potential engagement. One of these potential activities is with the interaction facilitation, with purposeful matching, big group meetings and small group meetings. Knowledge generation as well, with a common assessment product, externally produced knowledge products, peer-produced knowledge products, and training sessions. And of course, sharing and exchange, expert group peer review, single peer self-assessment, and multi-peer self-assessment. The tools most commonly used to sustain individual contact include pair engagement, online networking, peer-produced knowledge products, site visits, joint peer activities, and a variety of tools to foster sharing and exchange. Sustained engagement is not just about having the right opportunities. Peers need to be committed and motivated to continue engaging. This requires ensuring that they have a personal commitment to the process, are interested in continuing engagement, and have the support of their own organizations to continue engaging. This support is absolutely vital. The most effective tools to ensure peers remain motivated and committed to engaging involve what I mentioned earlier, face-time connections, where peers get to be with each other and even work together or experience each other's work environment firsthand. Peers will keep connected to each other if they have an explicit incentive to do so. This need is not necessarily financial and is probably most effective if it ties to their career progress or effectiveness at work. Peer training initiatives that connect activities to actual work tend to be more sustained than others. There is a need to ensure that there is a specific reporting process for the training, and that this process emphasizes the value of continued peer engagement for the participants and their organizations. Continued peer engagement requires technological solutions for communication. Peers who want to engage with each other will be put off if they have to organize all the engagements. Sustained engagement is more likely if a facilitating agency provides logistical support to peers who want to continue engaging. Peers can engage with each other in sustained ways, but not learn from each other, or they can learn only easily observable things with little transfer of latent knowledge of shared experience. This can undermine the value of a peer learning initiative, where even individual peers fail to learn from each other. There are a number of practical ideas to help ensure learning goals are met. The most effective peer learning focuses on sharing of tacit knowledge between peers, which includes knowledge about how to do reforms, managing politics, and more. This is only one kind of learning goal. However, others include formal knowledge sharing, peer-to-peer support and collaboration, specific training support, and more. Most peer training engagements do not specify the details of what kind of learning is expected or hoped for. However, these actions are something the most successful trainings have in common. This means that you should define some learning outcomes if you want then to measure it. If you don't define a learning outcome, then you cannot really evaluate how much learning was done. But these don't understand this like closing the peer training exercise to a broader view or a broader knowledge. It's not the point. The point is just ensuring that there is some clear knowledge that will be improved. Then it will be open for more knowledge to be learned, of course. Using evidence in the peer learning process helps provoke real learning. Real and deep peer training is often effectively produced through meaningful and inclusive conversation between peers. Again, we are talking here about a lot, we mentioned different role-playing activities, but we cannot forget that one of the best possible activities that there is basic conversation, a scenario and a discussion. We don't need much more than that to learn from each other. Many peer trainers note the value of combining more directed and specific training activities, sometimes tied to certification, with other peer training activities. The training activities have standalone value for individuals and their organizations, but could also provide opportunities for peer engagement and relationship building, and offer ways of framing more flexible follow-up peer training connections. Reflection is a key part of improving the effectiveness of the individual learning and of providing guidance on the overall impact of the peer training community so that strategy and direction can be improved for the future. Research has shown that taking time away from the process of training and relocating that for reflection on what has been learned significantly enhances peer training. It is useful to communicate learning objectives before starting a peer training initiative and to report on learning gains as the process progresses. It is important to have a mechanism to evaluate the learning gains from peer trainers. This is used to guide the trainers about what is expected, to promote the kind of tools that will maximize the learning, and to ensure accountability in the process for peer-to-peer and facilitator to the involved organizations. However, the common factors captured in evaluations of peer learning engagements do not focus on actual learning outcomes of individual. Research shows that evaluations tend to focus on initial engagements and overall outcomes, and not the intermediate learning objectives. Intermediate learning objectives need to be evaluated, because in this way you can, if you evaluate every part of the process, you can define what is going well and what is going wrong. If you evaluate the beginning and the end, you can say that you started with 100 peers, and in the end, due to lack of engagement, there were 20 in the final meetings and with the final outcome or the final learning objective done. But you don't know in which phase this engagement got so low. You don't know what the root of the problem is, and if you don't know what the root of the problem is very hard to solve it. So it is important. The evaluation is important, and I know it's a lot of times it's very hard to do it, and it's not that comfortable, and it's not that clearly necessary, but in the end it really is. So pay attention to that. Now I begin subunit C6, Phase 4, Creating Change at Scale. The final stage of the peer training process map involves diffusion or scaling of lessons learned from peer engagements back to each of the participant organizations, sectors and communities. This is the stage where peer training at the individual level is racked up to impact actual reform progress, and hence where the practical tacit knowledge gained from peers helps improve the success of reforms. This part is absolutely key if you want to change your organization, if you want to improve, if you want to use the knowledge gained and escalate it to a bigger level. Unfortunately, there is limited evidence that this kind of diffusion happens very often. The following ideas will assist those designing peer learning engagements or engaging in such to diffuse more often. Effective diffusion starts with some knowledge on what is being diffused. Organizations that know what learning they are trying to facilitate tend to have a better chance of structuring an appropriate and effective diffusion process. One of these ideas could be to get the peers to share forward, ensuring peers that reflect effectively on their peer training gains, ensuring peers that are willing to share learning back into their organizations. This is key because if you're a peer educator and you work for 6 months, 1 year with a group that has learned a lot, but then this group, part of these teachers go to the organization and they apply it individually. Well, of course you are already affected, and this particular teacher knows more and has more information. This is very good already, but this particular teacher that doesn't share with this organization is keeping part of the education he gained only to himself, when the point of peer learning and peer training is exactly to diffuse, to a continuous diffusion of teaching ideas, teaching techniques, of capabilities and activities to make our environment and our community better. So sharing with the organizations and trying to negotiate with the organizations to be able to improve what is being done so far, it's very important, and we have to make a very big emphasis on that. Then, of course, we have to ensure that home organizations are open to learn. And by that, it's I know it's not that easy, because if you are an umbrella organization and then you receive peer educators and then you send back to home organizations where you don't know nothing about, well, there is the potential that this home organization, the administration of this school or educational center or any type of organization, might not be open to change. And this is a struggle that you have to face, and you have to give tools to all the peers to try to convince. This is a negotiation to improve and to change your organization and the community. It would be great to ensure that organizations are willing to invest in learning from returning peers, and that might be more effective if you create a map of priorities, and maybe in the pre-foundational stage of all this process, try to talk with the home organizations and tell them that what the peers are going to learn with this initiative ideally should be applied, and see a bit the feedback they can give you. And of course, also very important, it would be to create time and space to bring the lessons home. So it cannot be an exhaustive training, because the peers have to have the opportunity and the time to share and to give to others what the group you're working with is giving to you all. So if it's too exhaustive, these, besides the work, besides maybe family, friends, people cannot do everything. So you have to really think about how to structure time coherently, so there is time for gaining in the group, but also for sharing what you gained in the group. In order to ensure diffusion and scaling of peer learning, both the peers and the organizations in which they work need to be considered. Not all home organizations are open to learning. The peer learning initiative needs to ensure that home organizations actually want their peers to learn and return home with new ideas. Individual peers are more likely to share forward into their organization if they are aware of this as a requirement up front, and if methods of sharing are established by the home organization. Peer learning can diffuse from individuals to organizations through networks. This can be constructed in various ways, including as mimics of the outside peer network, where the peer individuals are accessing new lessons. Building local peer networks is thus an interesting strategy to promote diffusion of learning. But it's not the only one. There are many more, and maybe there are organizations that are part of a big umbrella organization. The possibilities are really big, and you have to adjust into the case you are in right now. There are other tools that can be used to create links between the home context and the learning environment. The appropriate tool should be chosen for each situation. Learning in groups is an effective way of ensuring diffusion of peer lessons. Group-based learning involves people from the home organization working alongside colleagues who have benefited from external peer training. They work together on the job, and this gives opportunities for diffusion to the colleague who has been through external peer learning. Coalitions are very effective means for diffusing lessons, especially when these lessons involve tacit knowledge transfer. Organizations should invest in coalition building skills among both those who benefit most directly from peer training and those who are targeted as secondary beneficiaries. Diffusion of peer learning gains may be enhanced if it is actually measured. This is difficult to do, but could be possible and influential if organizations are clear about the kinds of lessons they expect to come from the peer training and how they expect these to impact home organizations and scaling to reform impacts, as will have been identified in any theory of change. Practical activity number 3. This activity has a duration of about 50 to 70 minutes. The type of the activity is a video and a debate, and the objective is to discuss and understand how to engage more students. The skills and abilities developed by peers are to stimulate communication, to engage, to work in a team, decision making, and to create change at scale.
Right now, there is an aspiring teacher who is working on a 60-page paper based on some age-old education theory developed by some dead education professor, wondering to herself what this task that she's engaging in has to do with what she wants to do with her life, which is be an educator, change lives, and spark magic. Right now, there is an aspiring teacher in a graduate school of education who's watching a professor babble on and on about engagement in the most disengaging way possible. Right now, there's a first-year teacher at home who is pouring through lesson plans, trying to make sense of standards, who's trying to make sense of how to grade students appropriately, while at the same time saying to herself over and over again, don't smile till November, because that's what she was taught in her teacher education program. Right now, there is a student who is coming up with a way to convince his mom or dad that he's very, very sick and can't make it to school tomorrow. On the other hand, right now, there are amazing educators that are sharing information that's shared in such a beautiful way that the students are sitting at the edge of their seats just waiting for a bead of sweat to drop off the face of this person so they can soak up all that knowledge. Right now, there is also a person who has an entire audience wrapped with attention, a person that's weaving a powerful narrative about a world that the people who are listening have never imagined or seen before. But if they close their eyes tightly enough, they can envision that world because the storytelling is so compelling. Right now, there's a person who can tell an audience to put their hands up in the air, and they will stay there till he says, put them down. Right now. So people will then say, well, Chris, you described a guy who's going through some awful training, but you're also describing these powerful educators. If you're thinking about the world of education, or urban education in particular, these guys will probably cancel each other out, and then we'll be okay. The reality is, the folks I described as the master teachers, the master narrative builders, the master storytellers, are far removed from classrooms. The folks who know the skills about how to teach and engage an audience don't even know what teacher certification means. They may not even have the degrees to be able to have anything to call an education. And that, to me, is sad. It's sad because the people who I described that were very disinterested in the learning process want to be effective teachers, but they have no models. I'm going to paraphrase Mark Twain. Mark Twain says that proper preparation or teaching is so powerful that it can turn bad morals to good. It can turn awful practices into powerful ones. It can change men and transform them into angels. The folks who I described earlier got proper preparation and teaching, not in any college or university, but by virtue of just being in the same spaces of those who engage. Guess where those places are? Barbershops, rap concerts, and most importantly, in the black church. And I've been framing this idea called Pentecostal pedagogy. Who here has been to a black church? We got a couple hands. To go to a black church, that preacher starts off and he realizes that he has to engage the audience. So he starts off with this sort of wordplay in the beginning oftentimes. And then he takes a pause and he says, oh my gosh, they're not quite paying attention. So he says, can I get an amen? Amen. So can I get an amen? Amen? And all of a sudden, everybody's reawoken. That preacher bangs on the pulpit for attention. He drops his voice at a very, very low volume when he wants people to key into him. And those things are the skills that we need for the most engaging teachers. So why does teacher education only give you theory and tell you about standards and tell you about all these things that have nothing to do with the basic skills, that magic that you need to engage an audience, to engage a student? So I make the argument that we reframe teacher education, that we could focus on content, and that's fine. And we can focus on theories, and that's fine. But content and theories with the absence of the magic of teaching and learning means nothing. Now, people oftentimes say, well, magic is just magic. You know, there are teachers who, despite all their challenges, who had those skills, get into those schools, and they're able to engage an audience. And the administrator walks by and says, wow, he's so good. I wish all my teachers could be that good. And when they try to describe what that is, they just say he has that magic. But I'm here to tell you that magic can be taught. Magic can be taught. Magic can be taught. Now, how do you teach it? You teach it by allowing people to go into those spaces where the magic is happening. If you want to be an aspiring teacher in urban education, you got to leave the confines of that university and go into the hood. You got to go in there and hang out at the barbershop. You got to attend that black church, and you got to view those folks that have the power to engage and just take notes on what they do. In our teacher education classes in my university, I've started a project where every single student that comes in there sits and watches rap concerts. They watch the way that the rappers move and talk with their hands. They study the way that he walks proudly across that stage. They listen to his metaphors and analogies, and they start learning these little things that if they practice enough, becomes the key to magic. They learn that if you just stare at a student and raise your eyebrow about 1/4 of an inch, you don't have to say a word because they know that that means that you want more. And if we could transform teacher education to focus on teaching teachers how to create that magic, then poof, we can make dead classes come alive. We can reignite imaginations, and we can change education. Thank you.
When the debate starts, you should guide them with questions like, how do you engage your students? How do you engage yourself? Do you understand the need to be engaged to inspire others? These ideas should be that you will share together should be written down by one peer who offers to volunteer. When talking about inspiration, you should guide them with questions like, do you seek inspiration for your classes? Where? How do you promote your students to seek inspiration? What does your organization do to promote students' inspiration? What could it do more? All these questions are aligned to make you understand what is put into place, not only from your part, but from the part of your organization, and what do other peers do. This might help you to gain new techniques and maybe develop a draft of an action plan to actually improve your inspiration towards the classes you are giving and the inspirations of your students as well. Well, this module is finished. I hope you learned a lot. I want to thank everyone who listened. We did this with the objective of pushing you to try out the peer learning initiatives, peer training, because it is very good potentially, and if you do it well, it can really create a different dynamic for our organization and for communities. So I believe it could be very interesting. Please go to our web, Safe School, and download the PDF of this module if you want to have it, if you need to check things, and if you have any doubt or need more information, you just can contact us via our web. And of course, don't forget you have an assessment tool with tests in our web to see how well did you learn this module, and to see if you need to improve or not. Well, thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you very much for listening, for being there. I hope you liked the module and you learned some new things. Please go to our website and check out the assessment tool so you can do a test and see how far you've got. Thank you very much.